Hello and welcome to Politics in this week of handovers here in France. Indeed, on Tuesday, France's first socialist president in 17 years made his way up the red carpet and into the history books, becoming only the second socialist in the Fifth Republic to take up residence at the Élysée Palace. After handing over the country's nuclear codes, Nicolas Sarkozy, accompanied by his wife Carla Bruni, left the palace and power behind him. The very next day, the man appointed by François Hollande to lead the government, Jean-Marc Ayrault, made his way to Matignon, taking over the premiership from the man who'd held it longer than anyone had expected him to, François Fillon. And later that day, a new government was born with the actual handing over of ministries taking place on Thursday. 17 men and 17 women who are taking a 30% pay cut and signing a code of conduct. All elements that already make this government different to those that preceded it. And that's what we're going to be discussing on today's Politics. I have the pleasure of being joined by Jérôme Guedj, a local councillor, of course, member of the Socialist Party. Also here in the studio with me today is Joël Gariot-Mellam, who is a senator and senator for the UMP party. Thank you very much for being with us today. First of all, I'd like to go back over the transition of power, the first one that took place this week between François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy. Jérôme Guedj, there was a real determination of what the French call rupture, break with the past. He wanted everything about the ceremony and his first steps in power to be different from what his predecessor had done.
Yes, because the change was one of the topic of the presidential election. And I'm sure that François Hollande wanted to embody from the beginning his volunteer of change. Nevertheless, we had a traditional ceremony that was quite classical, with a lot of gold stuff and things like that. It was with a lot of dignity and at the same time simplicity, but François Hollande wanted very soon to go on with the topics, the themes during the political campaign. First of all, because now we've got a general election in a few weeks, and he needs a large majority to support his program. So he's the new president, but at the same time, he needs this political support. So we are not still in campaign, but we have to keep on being aware of this issue.
Joël Gariot-Mellam, there is a sense that one is still in campaign. Of course, the legislative elections are coming up. But there was something, and we'll move on to the speech that he made on the day, which was quite political, but there was something also in the way that he thanked his predecessors, mentioning the achievements of each, and simply when it came to Nicolas Sarkozy, wishing him well for the future, that was quite brutal.
I was absolutely shocked. I mean, you know, I've always had respect for Hollande as a political campaigner. I mean, you know, I don't share his ideas, but I really did feel that this was something which lacked dignity. I mean, you know, it is a tradition, yes, to thank one's predecessors, but the way he thanked everybody except Nicolas Sarkozy was quite shocking. I mean, you have to have respect. Nicolas Sarkozy has achieved an enormous amount. Yes, I don't share the same political views, but you know, you cannot deny all what Nicolas Sarkozy has done. I mean, these incredible reforms that the country was needed, and not to acknowledge any of that, not to say even thank you, was properly shocking. I've noticed that since the ministers this morning apparently, you know, left with a bit more dignity, but that attitude of Hollande was to me extremely disappointed, and I'm sure it was very disappointed for a lot of people. And I would remind that 48% French people voted for Nicolas Sarkozy, and that also deserves some respect.
I'm going to put that to you in just a moment, Jérôme Guedj. I'd like us to have a listen, though, to François Hollande's speech, which very much set the tone, no doubt, of what we're likely to expect from him.
I will determine priorities, but I will not decide everything for everybody, everywhere. In conformity with the Constitution, the government will decide on the nation's policies. Parliament's rights shall be respected. The judicial system will enjoy all of the guarantees of its independence. Power at the head of the state shall be exercised with dignity and simplicity.
Well, there's François Hollande, his first speech then as president, making clear that he would be the president of all of France. And as we've been saying so far, rather try to handle business in a way that broke with the way his predecessor had. Here's what Jean-François Copé had to say immediately afterwards about the speech.
I think François Hollande is first of all a man who belongs to a clan. Forget the ethics lectures he may have given these past months. I think he's of a clan, the man of one political party.
Is that, there was both in the speech. There was the need to reconcile the French and to lead from, in a more perhaps inclusive way, consultative way than Nicolas Sarkozy had, and yet it was a very political speech. He seems to have managed both within one speech.
That's François Hollande. He's the president of all the French people, but at the same time, he knows that people voted for him, a majority of French people voted for him, for the change, for a break with the past, with Nicolas Sarkozy, and for several measures that need a political support in the National Assembly. Honestly, I don't think that he wasn't respectful with Nicolas Sarkozy. He mentioned all the former presidents. We have to remember that it was a quite tough campaign between the two men. It was one of the first time where the two candidates present at the ceremony. In the past, it was Jacques Chirac with Nicolas Sarkozy, but Jacques Chirac wasn't candidate. You know, honestly, the EMP leaders have very few things to say at the present time because they were defeated during this election. We have now a prime minister, a government, a fresh government. So that's very low polemics. That's the game.
Joël Garriot, Madame, I'd like to put that to you.
Yeah, I don't think it's a low polemics. I think it's a matter of behavior. I mean, Nicolas Sarkozy was extremely dignified in his speech of acceptance of the defeat. He said and he asked the members of the UMP not to treat Hollande and the left the way he was treated. Let's remember that for 5 years he had been always the scapegoat. He was a victim of so many attacks, which were extremely low, extremely humiliating, even for the people who have pronounced them. I mean, he invited François Hollande to come and celebrate this extremely important day of the 8th of May in all dignity. He didn't have to do it. And I really felt that Hollande shouldn't have behaved like that. Even starting his speech, I mean, the few lines you've quoted about saying, oh, I won't do everything. I mean, it was already a criticism, as we say in Hollow, en creux, in order to show that, oh yes, no, he would be.
But that's why French people voted for him. They wanted a big change at the head of the state because they had the feeling that Nicolas Sarkozy had decreased the conscience.
Yeah, Nicolas Sarkozy had one problem. He worked too hard, he did too much, he tried to achieve too much, yes. And he had all the media against him, criticizing him all the time,
you know, the campaign is over. The campaign is over. So
yes, the campaign
don't find
is
any reasons,
over,
you know?
But I still do feel it's important to say it, because we'll have legislative elections. I don't think, you know, huge majority of French people voted for Hollande. The figures are there. It's very obvious that, you know, Hollande didn't get all what was predicted he would get as a result. It was a very narrow margin, and I think we can win the legislative elections. I hope.
We'll see, and that's why we need a president, a prime minister, and a government that is not for the president, but for the prime minister and the government, that they are going to be involved in this political campaign, and that's fair.
One of the points about those incoming governments, the government, the president, is that they are such unknown quantities. We will be seeing the first cabinet meeting. It is the first time in the history of the Fifth Republic, I think I'm right in saying, that both the president and the prime minister will be attending their first cabinet meeting. These are unknown quantities, which is why both the words of François Hollande in his speech and the composition of his new government are being so carefully picked over. We're looking for signs about what to expect.
That's very true, but I think there are even more worrying trends. I mean, first of all, okay, for the image, I know Hollande during the campaign offered and promised everything that people wanted to hear. Yes, there's a decrease in the salary of the ministers, that's very good. But when you have 34 ministers in a cabinet, I mean, this is ridiculous. One doesn't talk about all the expenses linked to each of these ministers.
There were 32 in the former in the former cabinet.
With Secretary of State,
yes,
not the same level. And you know, when you look at all the European countries, I mean, you know, the British cabinet, you know, is as a quantity cannot go beyond by law. He has only 23 or 24 members, I cannot remember. And you have other people who are parliamentarians or who help on a voluntary basis. You have also, look at Germany. Germany has a cabinet of 16 members. I mean, 34. I know you wanted to have as many ministers as possible in order to say thank you to some political personalities, and because it's also useful in a legislative election. But I would like to remind you, we are in a period of crisis, and every single economist would know and would tell you that in such a period of crisis, you need, on the contrary, to have a much smaller government, especially when you have so many inexperienced ministers.
Point. He's clearly kept his promises. He's making statements. He's got this parity, 17 of each. They are taking this salary cut. He's living up to his campaign promises. He's reorganized the ministries of finance to reflect this this priority he wants to give to the rebirth of French industrialization. It's a very political statement that he's making as well, the formation of his cabinet. But there is inexperience there. And at a time of crisis, perhaps this will be one of its downfalls.
Honestly, you know, the crisis was has begun 2 or 3 years ago, and Nicolas Sarkozy didn't reduce his cabinet and his government when he made changes in his cabinet. We have a tradition in France that is quite different from Great Britain and France, with a large number of ministers. And François Hollande promised to have a reduced cabinet. With 32 or 34 members. We'll see if there is some state secretary. I don't even know if we're going to have state secretary after the legislative. But I don't want to forget, with also those law polemics, that there is a big political, historical and international event. For the first time, we have a government, a cabinet, with a parity, 17 women, 17 men. It was a big statement, a big promise from François Hollande, and he fulfilled his promise. And I think it will change more things than we think on the way we are going to take into account women's point of view in politics.
To his credit, Joël Garriaud-Maylam, he is living up to his promises.
I mean, this promise indeed, and I think it's a very good thing to have a parity, but you know, here again, you've got to go beyond the image and the appearance. And when I said I was very worried by that government in some aspects, I mean, in terms of foreign affairs, for instance, we have 2 very prominent ministers, Laurent Fabius and Cazeneuve for the European affairs. The 2 of them voted against the European treaty. I mean, I think
a majority of French people, you know.
Yes, yes, right, but it's not a very good sign because, as you know, France was very isolated.
The President of Republic and the Prime Minister voted for the yes, so there is a balance.
Maybe, but in terms of foreign affairs, in terms of having some responsible people going to see and negotiate with European governments, I think it's a very bad signal. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, I mean, we've already seen. I mean, you know, I seriously don't think that Germany is going to change its policy. You know, here again, it's like image. It's like Afghanistan. Okay, it has been announced that we would take our troops out of 2012. That works very well in terms of elections because obviously people are happy, you know, that the sun will leave Afghanistan. I can perfectly understand that, and that creates more votes. But you cannot decide that way. France is not an isolated small country in its little bubble. There's a world outside it. We need to negotiate. I mean, we have our defense. I'm not sure we'll be able to take all its troops before the end of the year when there are so many subjects. I don't know if you've been to Afghanistan. It's an extremely complex setup. And it's very complex and intricate with other countries. I mean, we've got to negotiate that together.
Yes, but you know, to negotiate, you need to have strong point of view, and especially point of view that have been supported by the popular vote. And François Hollande said, we're going to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan.
Yes, but that had been already decided.
And he will do that, and to negotiate
with
with Germany. We've seen in the last few weeks, even during the political campaign and after the election of François Hollande, that a lot of European leaders, even in Germany, were open-minded to this volunteer to adapt the fiscal treaty with a growth pact. So, if you want to negotiate, you have to be there. You have to be the boss. You have to have opinions. You have to be inclusive with the French people. Don't be arrogant with the vote of the French people in 2005. A majority of French people,
yes,
I voted no during this this referendum. It doesn't imply that we don't want a European project, but we don't want anymore the Europe of austerity. And we need more growth, and that's why we're going to negotiate. And I'm quite optimistic on the fact that we will obtain some results in the European Summit in next June.
All these tests, both internationally and nationally, to come. I'm afraid they'll have to be for another day, as we've run out of time. Thank you very much.
No,
I'm afraid it was rather too short. But looking at the early signals, then the composition of the government so far. Well, I do hope you'll come back and we can have these discussions once things have moved on a bit. Very much. Thank you, both of you, for being with us today on this bank holiday. Only analysing all this as it happens, in a sense, and on a day off. Thanks very much indeed. That brings us to the end of Politics. We'll be back, though, very shortly for another edition with plenty more to say, of course, on all that's going on in France's political scene. Thank you very much for being with us.